Hi, I'm Nicole Hoyer. I'm the Assistant Director of Government Relations here at the university and an alumna. I graduated in 2015 with a degree in political science. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about advocating and thriving in the new world. In the past year alone, Miami University faculty, students, and staff have had at least 1,612 interactions with government officials in the local, state, and federal levels. While this past year has been unprecedented, advocacy has never been more important. In the past year alone, federal representatives have released over $76 billion in funding for institutions of higher education in response to the pandemic. Before joining the university, I was in a state legislator's office and I saw firsthand how many more people were engaging in policy discussions and advocating on their own behalf due to the pandemic, more than I had seen in the rest of my time in a state legislator's office. Today, Sara and I will be talking to you about 3 different topics within advocacy: why advocacy matters, how to be an effective advocate, and also how to engage in advocacy. The first topic we'll be talking to you about is why advocacy matters. It is important to make your voice heard. Advocacy is a two-way street. For example, with students that we take to meetings with us when we meet with elected officials, for the students, they're getting exposure to the legislative process, and they're also getting to tell their story. In response, the elected officials get to hear the students' stories firsthand, and they get to see what is important to the students. This also creates informed and engaged citizens. To be an informed and engaged citizen is important to advocacy. It allows you to connect with elected officials and to get to know your own elected officials better. It also can secure meaningful change. Essentially, if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. And so to be a part of the conversations is important. And so this allows you to reach out and be a part of the conversations at either the local, state, or federal levels. And this includes, if you're an expert on a topic, that you are able to go in and talk to an elected official about what is important to you and what you have done research and have data on. For instance, we had a faculty member who has done extensive research on addiction come in and give testimony on sports gaming legislation at the State House. There's also the power of constituency. Constituency is probably the most important part on why advocacy matters. A constituent is someone who lives in an elected official's district, and so they are represented by that elected official. So for example, if you live in Butler County, your representative at the federal level would be Congressman Warren Davidson. Elected officials want to hear from their constituents. They want to know what is important to them so that they are representing them to the best of their abilities. And last, advocacy matters because it is important to build authentic relationships. By building a relationship with the elected officials, you're not only familiarizing yourself with the advocacy process and the legislative process, but you also will be able to maintain those relationships as elected officials change seats and as staff members rotate in and out of offices. This is important because at the state level, the state legislators have term limits, and at the federal level, there are more new members than ever before. And at both the state and federal level, often the aides are within their mid-20s, which means that there's a higher turnover rate with aides within each office. So by building authentic relationships, you're creating that trust and rapport that will last as you continue to advocate on behalf of yourself or the university or an organization. Next, you'll hear from Sara Linder, the Director of Federal Relations, about how to be an effective advocate and how to get involved in advocacy.
Hi, I'm Sara Linder, and I'm the Director of Federal Relations. I'm going to talk to you today about how to be an effective advocate. It's important to note that with a little bit of coaching and practice, anyone can be successful. So the first place that we are going to start today is thinking about what is your target audience? Who are you going to start with in terms of meeting with elected officials? We often recommend that you begin with your representatives where you are a constituent. They'll be most likely to be interested in taking those meetings and hearing directly from you your specific feedback on a policy issue. The other elements that are important to consider in who to target when meeting with elected officials is whether they are in leadership positions, sit on key committees of jurisdiction that might have the oversight over the particular topic that you are advocating on, and whether or not they're already an existing champion of that policy issue that you are going to be speaking with them about. The next element is to be a good brand ambassador for Miami, yourself, or whatever organization you are there advocating on behalf of. And regardless of whether you are meeting with the most junior staffer or the elected official, it's important to remember to be always professional and to keep your politics aside. The next element that we'll talk a little bit about is preparation. It's pretty intuitive, but do your homework before meeting with elected officials. One of the things that we find often very helpful is reading the background and bio of those that you may be meeting with to better understand the perspective of the elected official. It's also helpful to know whether there's a legislative history of that particular member being active on the issue and having positions before going in. As part of that preparation, we help to provide talking points or having you review key messages that you want to convey in advance of that meeting to make it as successful as possible. And when you're having a host of meetings, it's also important to tailor and hone that message for your audience. And knowing that some members, there are certain data points or arguments that may be more likely to resonate with some folks rather than others. So remember that it shouldn't be cookie cutter and doing the same type of message on behalf of your issue before every person that you may be meeting with. Another element that's really critical is thinking about the timing when you're going in to advocate. Often, you may be hearing about a specific key piece of legislation in the press or in the news right before they're about to take a major vote on it. But often, that's too little too late to be influencing the political process and making meaningful policy change to legislation. We help to advise on when the right time is to go in and to meet with legislators or elected officials to influence that process and be able to provide feedback at the appropriate timing. This next tip is really important that is often underutilized. I've seen far too many advocates go in and just talk about their specific request without little regard to what the office may be interested in and how they can actually help further specific issues that are of interest to the member and their office. Remember, you can be a trusted resource and be helpful to them, so take the time during your meeting to also find out ways that you can be helpful beyond just talking about the issue that you are there to advocate on behalf of. And last, but finally not least, is follow-up. Far too often, I've seen great meetings that lack the proper follow-up. It's so important to do a prompt thank you note and to always follow up with whatever the next step or action items or data points that you offered to provide promptly to the staff and office. This helps to ensure that you are continuing a meaningful relationship, and it's good to also keep in touch with that office periodically as you have updates or want to check in on the policy issue that you have advocated for. Now that you know how to be a successful advocate, we'll talk about ways that you can get engaged. This is a call for action where we would love to see all faculty, staff, and students participate in government relations and advocating before your elected officials. For faculty and staff, there are so many opportunities to get involved in government relations. Many of you are members of professional associations in your field or in your research area that often have advocacy days at the State House or in DC and have conferences and annual fly-ins. We are willing to help prepare you for those conversations and participate in those fly-in days in advance. We also often call on faculty to participate in our regularly scheduled meetings with elected officials. We also encourage you that if there are particular topics or research findings that you would like to convey to your elected officials, to reach out to the Aspire government relations team to engage in being able to participate in such meetings. Lastly, there are frequently opportunities to testify or brief legislative committees and members of Congress throughout the calendar year. We will often look for faculty with expertise in specific areas and also encourage you to reach out as well if that is something that interests you. For students, there are a number of ways as well to get engaged. The first being the Government Relations Network. Participating in the Government Relations Network allows for students to see firsthand how to be involved with government relations and the inner workings of Miami's government relations efforts. We frequently have students participate in meetings both virtually on campus as well as in the State House and DC, in meetings with lawmakers and staff, and also provide a number of opportunities on campus through study abroad, such as Inside Washington program, and other internship opportunities to get involved in government relations. We hope that now that you know why it's so important to be an advocate and how to be effective, that you now participate in getting involved in government relations. Next up, my colleague Nicole is going to talk about moving forward as we look past the pandemic, about how advocacy has changed.
In closing, while advocating may have looked different in the past year with more virtual meetings, we do expect that advocating will go back to a mixture of in-person meetings with phone calls and also virtual meetings. We encourage you to get involved. It's never been easier than ever. But from behind your desk or from your dorm room, you can share your research discoveries, what partnerships you're currently working on, and engagement with students. And we highly encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions. We want you to have a seat at the table and to be a part of policy discussions. We hope you will join us in our next 1,612 interactions with elected officials, and we thank you.